20 years after releasing his first thriller novel featuring former Navy SEAL and Secret Service agent Scot Harvath, New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author Brad Thor and his hero are back. Rising Tiger is the 21st book in the series, and I tore through it in 3 days. Another great read, and Brad Thor joins us once again from his home. Brad, always good to see you, and thanks for taking the time for us.
Oh, I look forward to this every year, John, so thanks for having me back.
What gave you the idea for this book? If I'm not mistaken, this is the first time you've had Harvath in India, correct?
Yeah, so I call what I do faction, where you don't know where the facts end and the fiction begins. And so these are meant to be taken to the lake, to the beach, you know, toes in the sand, book in the hand, short, crisp, cinematic chapters. I want you to have a great white knuckle thrill ride. But I also like to set the books against a true piece of geopolitics, if you will. And 2 years ago this summer, and I use it for the opening of Rising Tiger, Chinese troops crept over the border in the Himalayas into India. And there is an understanding from 1996 that you're not allowed to use firearms in this area. But they came in, these Chinese troops, with homemade weapons, iron rods studded with spikes, baseball bats wrapped with barbed wire, and they attacked the Indian soldiers trying to take land for China. And it was a 6-hour brutal hand-to-hand combat situation. And I thought, wow, that'd make an impressive opening scene in a book, a movie. And I said, but what else is going on in that part of the world? And I was very interested in what the Chinese were doing via their Belt and Road Initiative, the String of Pearls in the Indian Ocean. And I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if the U.S. decided we needed to shore up our relationships in that part of the world, and we wanted to put India at the center of an Asian version of NATO? And none of my contemporaries had set any novels in India. It's a real hotbed, particularly New Delhi, of international espionage. And I said, this is just too cool a place not to create a thriller and to be able to plant my flag and say I'm the first guy that, you know, that did it among my peers. So it was just really, really fun to do. And
you don't waste a lot of time in this one either. With that as a backdrop, I guess page 10, Scott's already in the middle of a dogfight. You don't waste a lot of time to get into the action in your novels. The last one, Black Ice, you had him going down in a helicopter on page 1. So that's, you don't want to let readers get comfortable. You really want to get them from the start, don't you?
I do. I don't want to break my arm patting myself on the back, so this is not what it's going to sound like it, but I make a lot of comparisons to the James Bond movies. I've done 21 thrillers with Harvath, and I say they're like the Bond movies in that you don't ever have to have seen another James Bond movie to go to the cinema and see the most current one. You're good to go. The other thing is I love how the Bond movies start with action. And so that's an old maxim in the thriller writing world, which is start with action and pay it off later. So I like people to open the book and just be slammed into the middle of an operation, a helicopter going down above the Arctic Circle, as I did last year. I think it's fun, and you grab readers right from the jump. And that's my job. I'm writing thrillers, so I have to thrill from page 1.
Yeah, you never have wasted a lot of time in the Harvath books. Had someone told you, Brad, when you released Lions of Lucerne, that you were going to be going strong with this character 20 years later, what would you have said?
I never intended to write a franchise character, to be honest with you, John. Before I became an author, I still am a huge reader, and I was a big fan of Michael Crichton. And I liked that Crichton could do a new book with a new protagonist, with a different history and all this kind of stuff. So I never intended to do it. And when I pitched my second book to Simon & Schuster, they said, no. You have to continue with Harvath. You have no idea the amount of fan mail we're getting and how much the readers love this. And so I did, and I've been with Harvath all this time, and he's been incredibly good to me and my family.
Why has it resonated for so long, Brad? Any idea?
You know, John, I think we all want this person to be out there, keeping us safe. I like to say that there is no American dream without those willing to protect it. My dad is a no longer active Marine. I've got a lot of friends in military, law enforcement, the intelligence community. So I think that when the bad guys don't play by any rules, we want to know that there's a guy out there. We want to believe there's someone out there, men and women, who are willing to kind of cut a couple of corners if that's what's necessary to take the advantage away from the bad guys. Good, strong moral code, does the right thing, doesn't always do the easy thing, because that's not what we're sending him to do. We're sending him to do tough work, and he gets the job done no matter what, every time.
I think Jack Carr calls it break glass in case of emergency.
Yeah, my friend Jack, yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and his latest book is a great read too. I interviewed him about 5 weeks ago, and we're going to hopefully talk to him again after his Amazon series launches here. Have you changed the way you write, though, Brad? Because you told me last year that you sit down and just go. Have you changed the way you would approach books since that very first one?
What has changed, John, the only thing that has changed is the length of the chapters. So my chapters now are 3 pages when they used to be maybe 12 pages. So the space that I used to do 1 chapter in is now 3, because I really like amping up that intensity. And I love particularly being on the road and doing book signings, and people say, gosh, I just can't put it down. You know, there's this way you write, and I get to the end and it's like, oh, okay, 1 more chapter. And that's music to an author's ears.
Yeah. In Black Ice now, you had Russian helicopter pilots and their classic rock, which you used an 8-track on your website as the way to introduce the playlist.
Yeah.
This time it's VJ from the U.S. Embassy Foreign Service. Harvath meets him in Jaipur, and all of a sudden it's just R&B music for the rest of the book. Now, is that kind of a little fun thing Brad's having with the characters? Because I've started to notice those little genres of music starting to peek their way out in your books.
I found, John, that readers it resonates with readers. They really like the use of music in the books and everything. And it's something that I've noticed. I can sit next to somebody on an airplane or on a ferry boat or whatever, and there's 2 things we can talk about, regardless of where we're from, what we do for a living. We can talk about a love of reading and a love of music. And so VJ, the ex-Indian cop in the book, was my attempt to take Sean Connery from The Untouchables and give him a little bit more of a sense of humor. And I've gotten a lot of good feedback from early readers on VJ. But yeah, so on my website, we do a playlist inspired by each book. And so VJ's got a 90s Jaguar convertible, and so we did a CD-ROM or a CD jewel case as the artwork for that playlist.
Yeah, and he got the little palm trees, got the little sunglasses going on, so you can picture this guy just by the description, just like the 8-track on the last one, which was inside the Russian helicopter that was going down at the very start. One of my most interesting pieces of this book, Brad, and I want to read it. This is page 224. Harvath hated the internet. He hated the political media complex even more. A bunch of loudmouth jackasses on the left and the right, getting rich by fomenting strife and convincing good Americans that their way of life was being destroyed by the other side. Instead of letting idiots on TV, radio, and internet convince that our good lives were terrible, we need to be practicing gratitude. Is that Brad's statement on social media and society today? It fits in tremendously with Harvath. He doesn't like that part of the equation. But I even sense Brad a little bit saying, please take what you've got and appreciate it.
It is. I actually blurbed a book by Jonah Goldberg a couple of years ago called Suicide of the West. And he said that this moment in American history, it's like standing at the peak of a mountaintop. And if we lean too far forward, too far back, we're going to fall off. And if you could be up in heaven and choose any moment in time, any country to be born in, you would take this moment right now with high gas prices, inflation, COVID still running around. We live in the greatest nation in the history of the world at the greatest moment ever in history. And we need to be thankful for it. We need to be grateful. That's the one thing I keep saying to my kids. Remember, leave grace for other people, because everybody you meet is going through something, and be grateful for what you have, because it's not until it's gone that you realize how good you have it. And we have it very good here. And John, the final note on that is that there is more that unites us as Americans than divides us. And too many people make their livings by trying to divide us, get us angry about things so that we go to the polls, or we keep tuning in to, or keep going back to this website. And we're all good men and women who want to take care of their families, have their kids have opportunities, see our children and grandchildren go further than we did in life. So that's really who we are as Americans. And the tribalism is something that breaks my heart to see. But again, I'm very thankful to live in the greatest nation in the history of the world at this moment. Very thankful. The
one thing that you said in our great interview last year was that you've really kind of backed off social media. You were active and have kind of taken a couple of steps back. So I really felt that as really like Brad saying, okay, here's where I'm going to put my stamp down. You're not going to see it on Twitter or on social media, but here's where I'm going to put my stamp down. Please read this. If you agree with me, great, but this is where I stand.
Yeah, listen, I'm writing a thriller, so there's not a lot of real estate to drag a soapbox into the middle of a thriller. But what's interesting is when you set a thriller like I did with Rising Tiger against everything in India, India is having many of the same issues that we're having. We're the world's oldest democracy. India is the world's largest. And they have a lot of problems with their society fracturing and people being turned against each other via social media. And the big thing I tell people is social media is one of our biggest national security risks. Because if you're only going to a page where everybody thinks like you and believes like you, you are incredibly vulnerable to be manipulated, particularly by foreign actors. The Russians and the Chinese love Facebook pages because they will come in and put stuff that sounds like what you believe in, but it isn't. And you're actually letting your guard down because you trust all the people on that page. So I've got a lot of reasons, not only from a domestic responsible steward of America position, but also as a counter to foreign influence, that I'm not a fan of social media.
We talked a little bit about your family last time, the fact that you had to move because of security issues and everything else in Chicago. But how important is your family? Because you tell me that you do your research and then you kind of go and get hidden away for a little while to finish this. So do they, I guess they've had to buy into what Dad does, number one. But number two, how supportive is your wife for making sure when you're not around taking care of the family? I know on my side, if I hadn't married a saint, we wouldn't be together 36 years with me being in TV. And so I imagine, or same way for you?
Absolutely the same. And I always tell people that what I do is a family business because my family is involved in this business. And so I'd let the kids in and let them see all. I was worried, to be honest with you. My dad went to college on the GI Bill and got into real estate development and construction. And I got to see a business like that. And I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to teach my kids about business by being an author. And it's actually the opposite. I've taught them a ton about business because I involve them. But they'll bring me dinner if I can't make it to the dinner table at 6:30. They'll make a plate and put foil on it, and I work above the garage, and they'll bring it over. So we're in this together, and we celebrate the successes of the books and finishing a book. But the kids feel involved. They don't feel like Dad has shut everybody out because then they would resent me and resent the business and resent the books. They've all been wonderfully supportive. So I agree with you. Had I not married a saint,
yeah, I mean,
wouldn't be where I am.
And I've said that for 36 years, really.
Congratulations.
Mark Greeney's Court Gentry is getting a Netflix film, The Gray Man. Jack Carr's James Reese is coming out with his own Amazon Prime series.
July 1st.
When are we going to see Scot Harvath on the big or small screens?
You know what? I'll tell you, I could write a book about all the twists and turns in Hollywood. A city filled with so many beautiful people. I have kissed every frog in that town. I have had more deals, more options that didn't come to fruition. But sometimes the best deal is the deal you don't make. And we are in a position right now where we've got a director, we've got unbelievable producers, we've got a fantastic showrunner. But until this thing actually gets off the ground, I'm not talking about it. I've been in this position where I've gotten fans excited before. My entertainment attorney says to me, this is the best deal we've ever put together. And if we can get it, we're at the 10-yard line now. If we can get into the end zone, it's going to be awesome. And I can't wait to come back and talk to you about it because these are huge stars involved. Well,
until then, we will continue to sing the praises of Rising Tiger, book number 21 in the Scot Harvath series. Brad Thor, they ought to charge you rent for how many weeks you're on the New York Times bestseller list. We really appreciate you taking the time. Congratulations on another great read. And once again, appreciate your time again.
Always great to be with you, John. Thanks for having me.